Hello, this is Dr. Jean, dear future people. Well, let's see what life force is. So we said that life is dynamic. It's like a force field, but it has a flow, okay? So it's dynamic, it acts like a flow, and it is also very creative. So it seeks out new planes, new perspectives. There is no discontinuity anywhere because it's a field, right? So it kind of extends everywhere. It is kind of everywhere. So life force, from a sufficiently high perspective, the origin of anything new is clear. Because everything being connected to everything, you will have to understand what are the most important factors influencing some things. And since you have a wide enough perspective, then you will be able to trace down the important factors, and you will see that everything is rooted in the past. There is no discontinuity, neither in space nor in time. So creative imagination can create a robust construct, not readily dissected by simple measures and units. This means that if you use your creativity and imagination, and that means that you will intuitively understand from a broad perspective, okay, how a pattern changes in time, okay, then you will have a model that is very robust. Why is it robust? Because the model considers a lot of factors, a lot of influences at the same time, okay? And because you have a robust model, you will not pick out one or two influences and say that, you know, from this point of view, it looks like this, but you will have different points of view, and you always synthesize the whole thing. Now, if you do that, what can you prevent? You can prevent algorithms. Why? Because algorithms always flow in one direction. Yes, they have yes or no inputs, but algorithms are always posi-dimensional, okay? So if you have this creative imagination, then you will be able to transcend algorithms, okay? And the virtual worlds, which are based on algorithms. So if you have innovation, novelty needs organization, okay? So for true innovation, you will be able to consider a lot of factors, and then instead of linearly extrapolating something, okay, you will have something organically new, which is at the same time anchored in the past. And we come back to the same idea, which we discussed so many times before, that you will build up robustness. Your stability will remain in spite of the fact that you have a lot of new things. Why? Because these new things are always built upon things, factors, and perspectives that you already have, okay? And you are not ignoring most of them, okay? You are building on most of them, okay? So, life is in motion. You see, in physics, temperature is defined as the average or cumulative motion of little particles, okay? So using that analogy, life is also, or mental function is also, can be described by using temperature, but temperature here is mental activity. So when you have mental activity, then you are able to consider a lot of factors, okay? And you see that everything kind of melts and merges together. Whereas if you have an absolute zero temperature, which means that you have a low mental activity, then things may be in a simple order, and things may be looking like separate, okay? because there's no motion. There is no dynamic patterns, okay? And so therefore you don't need to follow anything, and you don't need to consider anything. There is a simple and oversimplified order, okay? So novelty without sufficient organization is like an experiment without discussion and interpretation, okay? And generally leads to a revolution, generally leads to something that is not harmonious, okay? Something that is warped, something that is not well rounded, okay? And because of that, it will eventually lead to confusion. So you may have a good idea, you may follow up on that good idea, but if you don't understand how a good idea is likely to influence so many other factors that you have in mind, because your perspective is very wide, then your novelty may confuse you. You have less robustness to be able to digest, the consequences of innovation. Okay, experimental knowledge is a very small part of reality. Okay, why? Because experimental knowledge introduces fixations. You imagine that everything is fixed except one or two things, okay? So it's like novelty in a way when you don't consider a lot of things that that novelty may influence, okay? Then you make an experiment, okay? You only follow up results in terms of a few factors, and then you will not be able to predict what other factors that that experiment is likely to affect, because you have a narrowed perspective. Now, so quality compensated by quantity, okay, means that you have lack of sufficient organization, and you progress linearly, okay, and you do the same thing over and over again. And so if we here said that unlike life force, algorithms, okay, are based on fixations, meaning that you fix everything except a few parameters, okay, innovation without organization is based on linear extrapolation and fixations, because you believe that, like it's science fiction, okay, technology is gonna progress but nothing else is gonna progress, okay? So you see what one thing is gonna change to, and yet you ignore all the other consequences. Like, for example, those people will think and speak the same way as we speak and think, and the only difference between us and them is technology, right? So innovation and experimental knowledge, okay, all comes down to the fact, okay, that you compensate a well-rounded qualitative assessment with quantitative assessment. Instead of following something very deeply, you follow a lot of things a little bit, okay? And then you think that with large enough numbers, things will just even out, okay? Yeah, if your perspective is narrow and you don't have the sufficient organization to be robust, then this will satisfy you, okay? But if you have a highly organized system here, then you will see that it's just not going to be enough for you, okay, to do these large quantities of assessments like a computer can do, okay? But you need something deeper and something from a wider perspective, okay? So, there, quantity. Quantity is not only pertinent in science, okay, but it's also pertinent in unnecessary products and services, transportation, perspective, fuel shortage, okay? So you have an ease, you have comfort, and then you want the easy things, okay? Easy things. And this leads to this. And what is it that you are missing? It is the specialized care, okay? It's the specialized relationships that these things reflect, and you're gonna miss out, and then you will have all kinds of side effects. Okay, now, unnecessary products and services, okay, will lead to competition of resources, for resources. Why? Because everybody is doing the same thing, okay? Things are very highly standardized, okay? So if everybody is doing the same thing, then everybody needs the same kind of resources, right? And so there is going to be competition for resources like that. But if you introduce robustness to the system, if you are able to think through a large amount of factors, okay, then you will maintain your personal style, okay? Then you will be able, you will be inventive. You will be able to make good food out of different kinds of resources, okay? Because your attention is wide. Okay, now, truth behind obesity is ease and comfort over care, okay? You don't invest in understanding, okay, the complexities of what is good food and what is good lifestyle, okay? You do not understand that this all has to do about local uniqueness and local community, okay? You ignore your creativity and care, okay? And you do the same thing as everybody else, and in large quantities, unnecessary quantities. So now, what does this have to do with hoarding? Hoarding is, again, a fixation. Why? Because you do one thing over and over and over again. So you hoard enough money and treasures and fame and popularity, okay? But you do this not because you really need it, but you do this because you started something, you ignore everything else, and you have an established road which you continue because you know nothing else, you see? So it's again quantity over quality, okay? Instead of having a wide perspective, you narrow down your attention, okay? And once you did that, you notice nothing else, and you just go on and on and on and on, proceeding the same on the same established road in one direction. Excessive division of labor is all built on this, okay? You lose uniqueness, okay? If you may have a very high efficiency in doing unnecessary things, okay? Because you satisfy one need, hoarding, okay? You satisfy a virtual need, okay? And so you may be very efficient in that, but it's still a virtual need, right? What you really need is this. Something that you can use, but something that has style, something that has your unique needs, something that represents your unique relationship with the maker, okay? But instead you get this, something mechanical, okay? So you need art, you know, everyday art, but you get something mechanical instead, which you don't really need. And of course they make it expensive just for fun, and that will add to the seductive power of this. So homogeneity hoarding creates waste, because so many things are either unnecessary, or if they are necessary, you just need it for a second and then you go on. Why do you go on after a second? Because it doesn't really satisfy you, okay? Because it only has the surface, the form. It doesn't have the content that you're really needing, okay? And so, therefore, you're going to have a lot of waste of unnecessary things that accumulate, okay? And this leads to a community sickness. of divided attention, of inorganic attention, and the very narrow perspective. So there is a loss of natural harmony, obstructing the very flow of life, and you introduce artificiality, mass ideas, mass services, mass beliefs needing compensation. Dream worlds like that, like that, like that, and virtual reality. And once again, virtual reality is a compensation, it's a diversion, okay, based on algorithms, okay? It's not a real thing. Why? Because it has a lot of fixations in it. So you fix parameters, you only follow a few parameters, okay, and you ignore everything else. So that is why they are really not satisfying. You always need something new, but what you actually get is something superficially new, which you will enjoy for an hour or two, and then you need to change. Why? Because it doesn't have the organic depth. You see, that is the problem. So when you are fixated to a dream world, you are going to be unsatisfied, and therefore you need everything all over again, something new, superficial, and what you get is superficially new. So the whole process will propagate itself, and then you have hoarding and waste again, and then you get to confusion and depression and a sick community. So this looks good, this looks good, this looks good, but only on the surface. There is nothing in the deep. There is nothing organic behind this. So the truth about life is that it is immense. What does that mean? What does that mean? You understand that we're not talking about spatial, physical immensity, greatness, but we are talking about robustness. Robustness means that there are a lot of factors at play, and you, with your large, broad perspective, you will be able to consider a lot of them. Okay? It's so immense. Life is so immense that it cannot be viewed from above or outside. Because what can be viewed from above and outside is something simple. Something that has really a very simple pattern, okay? And you feel that simple pattern is somewhere far outside, somewhere independent from you, okay? Far away, and it's independent, okay? But if you understand the robustness of reality with a robust mind, then you will understand that you are in it. Because there is nothing that is independent of the patterns surrounding you. There's nothing independent of your thoughts, okay? So you feel involved because you are involved. You actually just realize that you are, okay? And usually you realize it not on the superficial level of reason and conscience, okay? But deeply, intuitively, okay? So life needs to be lived fully, with a free but organized, ordered flow. So it has to be free, okay, because it needs to go on. What is suppression and slavery? It's inertia, okay, because you are not free to develop on your own way, in your own local environment, okay? If you are inert, you are in an ice world where everything is fixed, okay? But if you are free, that means that you will be able to express yourself. You will be able to influence events. You will be able to be connected to the totality of reality, okay? And that means that you are an organic part in an organic reality that is alive, okay? So with that, you get harmony and proportionality, okay? Because the flow is not only in one direction. The flow is different in all directions, but it does go in all directions, okay? So there's not one direction, but several. truth is not objective or fixed, as life is not objective or fixed, okay? Why is that? It is because you are unique, and having a unique perspective, it cannot be averaged out, right? So the direction is unique, and the way you digest, you understand, you observe, you perceive the flow, okay, is also unique, okay? So it cannot be averaged out. Or you can have a consensus that so that you can better cooperate, okay? You coordinate your thinking process to some degree. Yes, you can do that, and you should. But it has limitations, okay? So the default is not an external fixed order with simple laws. Like in absolute zero temperature, you have an inert world with no changes, so that it's more easy to understand it, because there is no changes, there's no patterns, everything is frozen, okay? On the contrary, that is very highly artificial, okay? What actually there is a constant, albeit slow and gradual change. But there is change in all directions, okay? There are a lot of factors that are always at play, because life does not stop, okay? So that what that means is that your external, eternal, fixed world order is imaginary, okay? It's a bunch of algorithms creating a virtual world. But that thing is a castle in the air, right? It's something that you build up using extensions for your comfort. Because you believe that comfort is when you don't have to think hard. But that's not comfort. It always comes at a price, okay? So default is not object unmoved in rest. Default is a constant changing effect field, okay? Objects, okay, and facts are artificial constructs. What we have is patterns in effect fields. So similarly, the default is not fixed eternal order based on very simple laws, okay, that are unchanged and that are universal and that basically are fixed so that you can understand the world better, so that you can oversimplify, okay, so that you can describe the world using only a few associations and a few functions. No, that's not the default. That is something that you imagine to make your life easier. But that laziness, okay, that you satisfy by oversimplifying things, by believing that your world, as you see it, is based on a few rules only, which you observed in a local space-time, and then you artificially extend it to all eternity and to the immensity of space. That is imaginary. That is a castle in the air. Okay, that is not. So happiness is not a state to be reached and then you are there. Okay? Enlightenment is not a state to be reached and then you are there. Happiness and enlightenment need to be maintained. Okay? So in other words, it's a state of robustness, okay, that will need to be nurtured all the time, okay. So it's you see, if it was the case that it was a state that will maintain itself, then you would need fixations. You believe that things don't change, but things actually do change. Confusion with undigested information needing effort to organize, digest, and integrate. There's always new patterns. And it's unavoidable that you need to understand these new patterns, and you will need new methodology to understand the new patterns, okay? So your happiness is going to be let life flow, but influence that flow and organize the understanding of that flow, okay, with the high maintenance of mental cultivation, introducing a constant effort. So because this is so complex, and it is so, how to say that, it's so theoretical, okay, we introduce a little bit of visual aid. And it's going to be, this visual aid is going to be a flag. And we introduce 4 concepts, okay, which we are going to visualize on this flag, okay? So we introduce the color black. Here is black, okay? And that black is going to represent organization. Like there is organization in the soil, okay? It's an ecosystem that is very highly organized and robust and fertile. Why? Because it is very highly organized. Then you have white, okay, which is going to be a symbol for understanding spirituality, okay? It's like a cloud, okay? So you will have to have some understanding. It's going to be a very highly organized understanding, okay? And with that, you kind of free up and extend your understanding like you were a cloud in the sky, okay? And so you let go free your imagination and creativity. Okay, so white is going to be a symbol of that. Then you have to have force. Okay, the momentum, the vitality, like blood, like the rising sun. Okay, and that's going to be symbolism for that. Red and green, it's the abundance of life, okay? It's the abundant growth. It's the multi-directional, unceasing growth with a very complex pattern. That's going to be represented by green. So then you have the soil, you have the cloud, you have the blood or the rising sun, and you have the abundance of plant life, okay? And so from those 4 colors, we are going to have this beautiful little flag. Okay, just to remind ourselves that we introduced these concepts and we are going to use them. Now, here, I'm going to show you something that is a very important concept, okay? And it's immensity. Immensity here stands for the lack of fixations, the lack of definite borders. Immensity means here a broad perspective, okay? Now, imagine that the sky is not a person. It's not a well-circumscribed unit with definite boundaries and contours, okay? But immensity, okay? Where there is change, of course. I mean, the sky here is not the same as here, okay? Similarly, the sea here is not the same as here, okay? But there is immensity and there is continuity, okay? What is here influences what is here. Okay? So it's an immense system, a robust system that you understand with a broad perspective, okay? With a lot of variety in it, a constant change in it, but there's also uniqueness everywhere. Okay? Now, so let's define a few things so that we understand them and we can use them for the future. Okay? We are going to call these methodical entities. So we understand that a system is a unit of attention. Okay? Local patterns in space, in time, or otherwise. Okay? That you are able to see as interconnected. Okay? So you may see a human body as a system. You may see the forest as an ecological type of system. Okay? But really, it is very highly dependent on your attention span. You know, how much interconnectedness you are able to see. So a system is an artificial unit of attention, which can be very useful sometimes. So space is going to be a projection of orientation, okay? So you see things, you touch things, you use your proprioception, okay? And you are going to extend that with a concept called space. But remember that this is a model. Really, space is a concept. It's not a physical object or even a physical entity. Space is a concept. Spatial orientation, generalized and extended. Similarly, time is a standardized projection of change. Okay, you see changes and then you perceive a weighted average of changes around you, and that is time for you. Okay, you can generalize it and extend it using all kinds of fixations, and then you believe that time is something universal. But that's a very simple model. Okay, that's really not what time is. Time is a useful tool that you introduced by observing the average rate of change in your environment. Okay? So these are aids in understanding, otherwise called concepts. Okay? Not properties of an outside fixed existing reality. No. There is no such thing as an absolute reference frame with an absolute space and absolute time. And there is no something as an independent system. All right? And that is because you have force fields or you have effect fields. Okay? With effects that follow patterns, but those patterns change all the time. Okay? So there's nothing constant and fixed about any of these things. Your coordinate system, okay, your clocks, all those things just further this model, okay? But this model, however much you build up on it or let it grow, these models are only models. It's like a teddy bear, okay? So it's not a real bear. These are models. And these models do not reflect reality. They reflect reality from a certain point of view. And that certain point of view, if you are robust enough, will itself change. Independent system, empty spacetimes, these are imaginary. Influence fields are everywhere, effect fields. They are continuous and they are in superposition and themselves change all the time. So again, this is like absolute zero, you know, a simple system based on just a few variables that you are willing or able to consider, okay? But these are artifacts of mental inertia. So the more your mental activity is high, like high temperature in physics, the more you understand, okay, that these are just very, very, very oversimplified concepts, very, very simple models, okay? And then once you understand that, you use them accordingly. So the world is also a methodical entity. It is the totality of what a sentient being can grasp of reality. So the world is always local, okay? And the world is in constant flux and change. Why is that? Because as things change, your perspectives also change. So what you actually are aware of will itself change with you and with everything else. So the world is never fixed. What is fixed is an artificial world of algorithms and a posi-dimensional entity, okay? The world is relative. There's no absolute reference frame here. And again, there is a world of belonging to a person, and there is a world belonging to a group of persons, and there is a world belonging to a whole society, okay? But it's always relative to something. It is always in relationship with something. It's a model of somebody, okay? Now, the universe is your world with special emphasis on the physical aspects of reality, okay? So the universe is different from the world, okay? Because the world may have a lot of things in it, but the universe has specifically the physical aspects emphasized, okay? So the world and the universe are very different. Reality is even more different than that, because reality is the totality of all possible or imagined content, okay? It is not the totality of the actual, the observable. It's the totality of the actual, observable, and possible and imagined, okay? It's the whole thing together. And remember, what you see as actuality, it depends on you, on your interest and your capacity to observe. Okay? Actuality is far more than what you are able to detect of it. Okay? And actuality is always in flux, because anything that is potential, if your reality is robust, then it will manifest sooner or later or somewhere, okay? Because the patterns are immense and robust, right? So reality is not only the narrow band of actuality that you are able to detect or you are willing to consider. It's much larger than that. So the world and the universe are always relative to a group of sentient beings. The world is a subjective projection of reality based on a sentient being's unique mind processes. Okay? So there's a lot of relativity in terms of world and even the universe. Okay? Now, a category is defined as a mind construct based on a set of similarities used in ordering, digesting, organizing life experience. So basically, category, okay, is a model which is used to order things, okay, to simply digest things. But again, category, okay, is like a car part, okay? It is using an assembly line, all right? So it fixes things. It doesn't see things in its entirety, in its complexity, okay? So category is always very, very, it's like very constant and very uniform, right? So categories are really are a basis of algorithms, and category and algorithms are part of oversimplifications because they are based on a narrow perspective. Okay, and what they lead to, if you don't see the limits of categories, they lead to a virtual world. So the world is finite. Why? Because it's relative to somebody whose understanding is finite. Okay, but it can be extrapolated into infinity. Okay, so in other words, you enlarge your world. Imagine now somebody says, well, this is true here, so it has to be true everywhere. So that somebody extends a local observation to every possible spatial and time regions. Okay, so that extension is going to create an extended world that is specific to that person. Okay, so it's locality extended. And the problem with that mechanism is that you are gonna be dropping your truth value the further away you go from your original observations and the original patterns prompting you to observe things. Okay? Reality is infinite. Not in terms of mechanically infinite or physically infinite, but in terms of complexity. Because there is constant change, not in one direction or this direction, but in all directions and at all levels. Okay, and you have an infinite factors to consider. So reality encompasses also everything that is potential. And what is potential will actualize sooner or later, okay, because your system is robust. So a world limited to actuality is limited to actuality. So in other words, you observe something and then you extend that, okay? But on the other hand, reality contains all the subjective elements: imagination, focus, interest, and sensitivity, right? Because reality is not standardized. Reality is so robust and so wide that any imagination, any special interest has place in it. Uniqueness has place in it. Okay, that's how robust reality is. Since imagination, focus, interest, sensitivity are not invariable among sentient beings, therefore what they grasp about reality may be vastly different. Okay, so the world is subjective to that sentient being, and the world is a subset of reality in this sense. While standard objectivity is only possible once a sentient being is standardized with no major differences in imagination, focus, interest, and sensitivity. But you understand that that's a very high-handed presumption that all sentient beings, all subjects can be standardized. And without the standardization, there is no such thing as existence. Because the concept of existence falls apart the minute you understand that things are not independent and not uniform, but things are interconnected, they are interlive, and they are unique and complex. And that moment, existence, the concept of existence, is going to be insufficient, right? Reality must be organic because of summation of infinite influence fields. Ignoring this leads to an image of post-dimensional world, a world of algorithms with low content and compensatory linear extrapolation, quality compensated by quantity, okay? In a world where colors are not sensed, color is not a dimension to describe the world, but that's your limitation, okay? And then you say, there is no such thing as color. Yeah, there is no such thing as color because you are not using it because you are colorblind, okay? So it is relative to you. In the country of the blind, vision is not a valid dimension. It is true. But you see, the subjects, the sentient beings, the observers are different, and they cannot be standardized. There's no absolute reference frame which says there is such a thing as color. You use color because you are able to distinguish colors, and it is useful for you. But in the country of the blind, where nobody is able to see color, color has no meaning. Okay? And it's not a valid dimension for those people to understand the world, because they need to use different kind of methodology for that. So an empty world is only possible if nothing is sensed. Content is based on the ability to interact with reality, and the interaction that drives the appearance of dimensions. So what this means is that there is no such thing as emptiness, right? Emptiness in what sense? Emptiness means lack of effects, lack of influences, lack of interactions. But there is no such thing, because every influence has a potentially continuous and immense and infinite effect field. So nothing can be empty of influences, of interactions. Divinity. Now this is difficult, okay? If you understand reality as organic, okay, then an organic reality may be called divinity. If you understand that mind and reality are no different, because mind function and life and reality are indistinguishable. They are all immense, they are all infinitely complex, and they are all infinite. Okay? You call that concept a divinity. Divinity is not an idol, it's not a person, it's not an object, it's not an idea, it's not a model, it's not a unit. Okay? It's a concept. A concept that reality is organic, right? That reality is alive, that reality and mind interact, and they are not separate, okay? That concept is called divinity. Divinity is not part of the physical aspect of reality. So many people believe that divinity is in space and mix up these two concepts. Space is the extension of spatial orientation, whereas divinity is the concept of organicity of life. The two things are different, okay? You can bring them together, but they are fundamentally different. They're on a different plane, okay? So you cannot place divinity in the physical universe, because the two things are separate, okay? Divinity is in a spiritual plane. A spiritual dimension is necessary to describe it, okay? A way of deep understanding. Religion is life organization based on organic interaction with reality, not linked to the physical universe, okay? It's life organization, which has very little to do with spatial orientation. I mean, that's part of it, but a small part of it, okay? So life organization based on an organic interaction with reality of a certain community, okay? And then you have religious tradition, which is relative to that certain community, okay? But religion, the potentiality of religion is also endless. Divinity may be imagined anthropomorphic for easier understanding as a metaphor, okay? But divinity is not human. if you believe that divinity is human, if you link the two things together, okay, then you also link reality as human. All right? And you understand that that is an oversimplification, a fixation. Okay, so I understand that the most fundamental truth is that you are able to, like a child is able to distinguish facial expressions, moods, different persons, because that's most important for a child. Okay, so these things are very deeply anchored in the mind from the individual point of view. And then people mix up the anthropomorphic reality, which is the familiar, the simple reality, with something as complex as the organicity of the world. Okay? But the origin and the essence of these things are quite different. Not separate, but different. Okay? So if so, it may have a male element and a female element, and these are not separate, not superior, not inferior, not equal, but different. Okay? So in other words, yeah, I mean, you can believe that there is a divinity linked to the sun and divinity linked to the earth, okay? But these are models used as metaphors for easier understanding. But if you are robust enough, then these simple models will not be enough for you. Okay, they are nice, but not enough. Okay, organicity is not a spatial phenomenon. Organicity is not an anthropomorphic phenomenon. Organicity is a general concept, okay? Not linked to a specific, sub-concept such as space and anthropomorphic models. So the differences are only defined as a description in relation to. Okay? So the difference is in relation to somebody who is able to distinguish the differences. Okay? Left is to the left in relation to something that is more to the right. And left and right are linked to the person using them because they are concepts, they are spatial concepts, okay? The male element is in relation to the female element. There's no such thing as male, there is such thing as male in relation to a female, okay? It's not an absolute thing. It's not an absolute reference frame, okay? These things are used for comparison and for comparison only. So the organicity of life, okay, or the organicity of reality, okay, may not need to have these elements. You might link it to them, but, that's up to you. Right, left, male, female, these are categories. Okay, that are by definition not superior, inferior, or equal. Okay, that's another very simplistic model. Something is superior, something is inferior. Right is better than left, male is better than female, or vice versa. Okay, these things are confused. Okay, because these only describe differences. Okay. That one is different from the other, okay? And those differences are noticed for some specific reason. For example, to coordinate, okay, go more to the right and start building that wall more to the right, okay? These things are used for cooperation, okay? So they are coordinated concepts. Different things are not uniform, so they cannot be equal, okay? Your equality means that you misunderstand things, because what is equal must be from some point of view the same. But you understand that your differences are perceived from one specific point of view, and they are equal from that specific point of view. In every other way, they are not equal because they are fundamentally different. Okay? So your ideas of equal, superior, and inferior all come from oversimplification. There is no such thing as superior, inferior, or equal, except if you purposefully, intentionally want to oversimplify something. Right has only meaning in relation to the left. Male has only meaning in relation to the female. Okay? These are differences which have your orientation, but these are models that are always oversimplified. Divinity, therefore, may have a male and female aspect if you want to use that metaphor. But the minute you want to fix this and make everybody believe that divinity has a male and female aspect, okay, you're just simply wrong to do that. Because that was your concept from one point of view, okay? Divinity is not physical. It may have a physical projection for you, okay, as its influence is felt in the physical as well, but the concept is basically different from the spatial aspect. You see, the whole confusion comes from the fact that you believe that empty space is real, and empty space encompasses everything, okay, and that is based on the fact that you extend things mechanically. You use models that are primitive. And so you mix up the concepts of organicity and the spatial and physical aspect of things. The two things are different. They are not separate, but they are different. So, a painter's imagination on the theme of divinity is just that. A painter's imagination based on his culture, his interests, his sensitivity, and it's the same thing as a scientist believing in eternal natural laws that can be described by equations, okay? Citizens believing utopia, okay? Or science fiction believing in a technological advanced society. These are all variation on the theme of imagining a deeper, larger organic order with more potentiality beyond actuality, ignoring this. In other words, you believe that there is no larger organic order. You believe that there is a simple order, okay? You believe that your models are universal, okay? And there's not a possibility for other models for different subjects, for different observations, for different conditions, okay? So utopia, science, and art are all very useful things, but they are not universal. Mathematics is not a precise representation of the world, but an abstract representation of how the human mind sees it. Okay? Art is very local. Science is very local. And utopias are mechanistic linear extrapolations. But if you imagine that there is a larger organic order and you don't fix that, but you understand the infinite potentialities behind it, okay? Then you understand that this complex phenomenon requires a very broad perspective. And that very broad perspective means that you need to be robust, and robustness needs to be maintained by constant mental cultivation. Okay, so your idea of divinity, your idea about reality, your idea about the world are strictly dependent on mental cultivation. You see? All right. So divinity is beyond the actual. It's also the potential. In fact, that's the very idea behind organicity. That what is actual is a model of it, but organicity has much more potential. It is not what is, but what can be. Organicity has infinite combinations and infinite potential for this to eventually manifest. Okay, divinity is beyond categories. For organicity and potentiality is to be described by an infinite number of categories due to the infinite complexity. Okay, so you cannot put divinity and reality in a cage because they are not to be limited. They have infinite potentiality. Okay, and that's what organicity means. That everything interconnects interlive with everything else, and since everything influences everything, there are infinite potential combinations. But since you have an infinite frame of reference, okay, every potentiality counts. Remember the chess game, okay, from which you are trying to learn. It's not only important what actually happened. It is also important what variations may exist from what actually happened, because those variations may be then played the next time by a player, okay, as that person learned from not only what actually was played, but also what could have been played, and uses that for future reference. Okay, life force knows no boundaries as it overwhelms and dilutes them. Okay, so in other words, if your temperature is high enough, you extend. And overwhelms and dilutes all uniform influences, because life is organic, so it always has an infinite number of factors in it. Divinity, similarly, like life, knows no units, no categories, and it overwhelms and dilutes them because it's organic. Okay, it's the very concept of organicity of the reality. Life force is not static, not fixed. Divinity is not fixed, not static, nor fixed. If you believe that divinity is fixed, in other words, it's posi-dimensional, it's mechanical, it relates to space, it relates to humanity, then you are talking about a model of divinity, not divinity. Okay? It's like a teddy bear to a real bear. Okay? It's a model. And if you don't have enough mental cultivation, then that model is going to be enough for you. Okay? And then you end up with an idol. But if your mental cultivation is high, your mental temperature is high, this is not going to be a sufficient model for you. Categories, distinctions create the illusion of distinct, homogeneous units, discontinuities, emptiness, separations between divine and not divine, organic and not organic. But if you use categories as tools and you are able to transcend them because you see their limitations and you see the limitation of usefulness in certain conditions, then these fixations in terms of primitive models, okay, will be transcended, okay, because they are not going to be good enough for you. So now, the organicity of reality with infinite potential is also a concept. It's just a very advanced concept, but it is a concept. And it is a tool for you to understand that actuality is not fixed. Order is of infinite complexity, except when you have total mental inertia. Then you don't need to introduce the complexity of reality. Because if your mental activity is zero, okay, then you will not be able to interpret and notice and understand change, okay? And without change, it's a nice world, otherwise called as hell, okay? But if you have mental activity, then you have the robustness, you have the abundance of patterns understood, okay? And you understand that since things are organic, you have to have an abundant variety of observations, and then you are going to have a broad view, and because of your broad view, you are going to be robust, okay? And the multidimensional inorganic order is going to be too primitive a model for you, and you are not going to be satisfied, okay? And so, let's look. Numbers. You understand that numbers are not the secret of reality. Numbers are models, very primitive models indeed. They don't exist, okay? They are tools that you may or may not want to use in a certain given situation, okay? But numbers are not objective, existing entities. They are merely tools, okay? And if we understood that, then we are going to go much, much further in detail in the next presentation. Until then, thank you for your attention and goodbye for now.